My parents told me the house we were moving into was new construction. They swore by it, telling me I didn't have to worry about monsters under the bed or bogeymen in my closet because it was all fresh and unsullied. There would be no horror hiding in a brand new home. I accepted this readily, as it made perfect sense to my 12-year-old mind. I had yet to hit that sticky spot in puberty where I questioned everything my parents said. The first 2 years flew by. I went from having nightmares almost every night at the old house to only having pleasant dreams. By the time I was ready to start high school, I finally felt normal. I had made new friends in this city. I had finally gotten comfortable letting people come to my house to hang out, and I was no longer afraid to sleep alone in my own room. It seemed like things were looking up for me after a lifetime of paranoia. The first house, left behind in the swamps of Louisiana, was something of a family heirloom. My great-grandfather had inherited it from his wife's family after she died from a severe case of pneumonia, and it had been passed on from family member to family member ever since. My parents stayed there after my dad returned to school to get his MD, mostly to save money, and they got so comfortable that they chose to stay. Eventually they had me, etc., and things were great. I had friends, albeit imaginary, and I was a timid and precocious child. Eventually, though, I was unable to outgrow feeling my imaginary friends. At about 8, I could no longer see my friends, nor could I hear them, but damn it, could I feel them. Their weight on my bed at night, their breath on my neck. On the warm summer nights I could feel them, sometimes stroking my arm, sometimes trying to slide their hands under the covers and stroke other parts of me. I had no idea what any of it was at 8, but I figured it out fast. Sometimes I would wake up with scratches or bruises, and my parents once pulled me out of school because they found a hickey on my inner thigh. I told them, repeatedly, "It's my friends, the ones that live with us," but they just got mad at me and said that I needed to grow up and tell them what happened. Eventually, I got sent to special ed because of my vivid imagination that kept worming its way into my schoolwork, and finally my parents agreed the only way to shut me up was to move. They looked for a few months, but they didn't want to buy a house that would allow the problems to continue, and they had trouble finding good quality new homes, so they gave up the search. It wasn't until just before my 12th birthday that my dad got a job offer at a cardiovascular hospital out of state, and, aware that the pay would be better and the housing market was prime for buyers, he packed us up and moved us out. But I digress. This isn't a story about the old house. This is the story about the new house. I came home from school about 2 weeks into my freshman year and stopped to grab the mail on my way into the house. It was all normal at first, bills, companies trying to get my dad to display advertisements for their products in his office, etc. One thing was odd, though. A smaller manila envelope at the bottom of the pile had our old address sloppily scrawled as the return address. I shrugged it off, knowing that my parents were renting that house out, and just assumed the current tenants mailed some forms over. Still, after 2 years of having nothing to do with that house, I did not like the surprise reminder that my family is connected to it. But then my parents handed me the envelope at dinner, already opened, and said it was for me. I took it reluctantly and pulled out the contents, a drawing I made in elementary school. I was a forest green stick figure eating ice cream with a black stick figure in front of what I assume was my elementary school. There was a note attached in a different messy script that the address and its message was short. "Found this in attic. Thought you would like it back." I laughed, certain that this was the last thing I expected to receive. My parents seemed relieved by my reaction, and I was relieved that it was nothing terrifying. It wasn't until I was lying in bed that night that I stopped to wonder who the black stick figure was. Perhaps a friend long forgotten, or just a classmate that sat at my table for group. I tried to shrug it off, but something didn't seem right. It wasn't until I was too far in sleep's embrace to shake it that the memory of this friend crept into my mind, vivid and fresh. That night I had tumultuous dreams, my first nightmare in 2 years. I was a green stick figure, happily licking my ice cream outside of school during lunch hour. That black stick figure, mischievous and jealous that he could not have my ice cream, snuck up behind me and pushed me down. I cried and cried and cried, watching as my ice cream melted into the ground and the black stick figure started laughing a warped laugh that sounded like a vinyl record that had been damaged. But the laughing wouldn't stop, and even when I woke up that morning, I could still hear it ringing in my ears. The next morning, I was exhausted, but still not as frightened as I would have been had I still lived in the other house. I told myself the nightmares were a result of having seen something I wasn't expecting, and I was satisfied by my own answer. Until I saw the bruises on my leg, 5 small round ones spaced, as though someone had grabbed so tightly with their fingertips that it left marks. I had no explanation for that. Things continued seeming normal after that night. No more nightmares, no more bruises, nothing out of the ordinary. And then a second envelope arrived. This was in closet. Don't forget your friends. I looked at the photograph behind the note and saw a picture of me at what had to be my 6th birthday party. The table was set and I was blowing out the candles. There were 2 empty chairs on either side of me that had plates in front of them, as though someone was meant to be eating there. This time I was able to remember the moment immediately, and I knew the chairs were for my imaginary friends. Spooked, I decided not to mention it to my parents so I could spare myself the lecture. I stuffed that enveloped into my drawer with the other one and fell into a fitful sleep that night. At one point I thought I could feel someone sitting on bed, or maybe a warm and wet tongue on my neck. I woke up the next morning in so much physical pain, every step I took making me ache. When I saw myself in the mirror before I showered, I realized that I was covered in hickeys, and when I took my underwear off, I realized that there was blood in them. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't know what these things meant, but now that I was in high school, I had a better grip on sex and the stuff people get up to. Seeing the blood made me flash back to being a kid, finding blood in my underwear, and having my parents get really upset. I shuddered when I realized what it meant, and a wave of shame crept over me. I sat under the steady stream of water from the showerhead, crying, for at least 3 hours that morning. Things only got worse, though. It went from being infrequent, the occasional envelope and nightmare, to me having these problems even when the envelopes were nowhere near the forefront of my mind. One day I woke up midway through a nightmare and I couldn't move a single muscle. I was paralyzed, but I could feel everything. I could feel the weight resting on my bed, the hands sliding across my chest, down the waistband of my pajamas, and then I could feel whatever this was forcing its way inside of me. It hurt so badly that I nearly passed out, and I spent every waking moment after wishing I had. I could faintly feel something wet dripping down and realized I had once again been torn open. As soon as I was capable of movement, I ran to my bathroom and vomited, crying and trying to hold back my screams. Again, I was too afraid to tell my parents, who would believe someone saying a spirit or something was raping them. And even if they did, how weak would I look? A guy that was not just getting raped, but getting raped by a ghost? I resolved to stop by a store on my way home from school that specialized in holistic medicines and stuff like that. I knew that the woman who owned the store, Christine, was at least informed about the paranormal. There were rumors about it at my school, and at this point she was the only person I could think of that might believe me. The store was small, crammed between a coffee shop and a Mexican restaurant, and dimly lit. The windows were tinted to near blackout levels, and the sign out front said, "Natural Remedies," written in big letters on a chalkboard. I walked through the aisles, uncertain of how to go about talking to a woman I had never met about my problems. when she was suddenly behind me. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice ragged and aged, as though she'd been smoking for years. She was short but extremely slim, outfitted in hemp sandals, black jeans, and a white t-shirt that said "Natural Remedies" across the chest. I couldn't tell how old she was, but she was definitely younger than her voice made her sound. "Ah, yeah. What can you tell me about, I trailed off, taking a deep breath. This was more difficult than I thought. "Please don't think I'm crazy. I just really need help," I said in a rush. "I need to know about hauntings." She raised an eyebrow at me and beckoned me to the front of the store, where the cash register was, and pulled a book out from under it. It was large, bigger than my textbooks, and she opened it before I could clearly see the cover. "Please, describe the things happening in this haunting, and I'll look it up for you and suggest a remedy to ward the spirit away." Since this was already going much better than I expected, I decided to lay everything out and tell her about what was happening to me. She stayed silent the whole time, only raising her eyebrow once or twice, and then didn't even bother to leaf through the book. "Get a sage stick, some of my blessed salt, and this herbal powder dash." She gestured to a pestle and mortar behind the glass case with some sort of powder that looked more like what comes out of a nasty zit than anything else. "And I want you to burn the envelopes containing the pieces of your childhood. If this doesn't work, please come back and see me. There are only a few things that could be doing this to you, each more dangerous than the last, and this is the best way to start. These are the more harmless remedies, less likely to anger the entities." She made me agree to come back and see her in a week if things went well, immediately if they did not, and told me that she did not want to discuss what was doing this to me until she knew whether or not what she suggested worked. My fear would only fuel their power, and if I knew their true name then, it would make them stronger. I agreed that doing it this way was better, and I got to my house as quickly as I could. I followed her advice, burning the sage in my room and then lining the place with the salt. I also burned the envelopes, sprinkling the puss yellow concoction on them as they crackled in my trash can. The room smelled terrible afterward, but it felt good to burn it. Exhausted, I fell asleep almost immediately and had pleasant dreams. I saw her the next week, happy to report that nothing had happened since, and she seemed both wary and relieved. I assured her that the semi-visible hickey on my neck was a remnant hickey, at least I thought it was, still fading away because I bruise easily, and she gave me a card with her cell phone number on it, in case of any emergencies. My life was normal again at last. The next time I got a letter in the mail, there was no return address. I was afraid to open it, but the handwriting was much neater on this one, and I decided that, should anything happen, I'd just call the Christine and ask for her help. Inside it was a letter, typed, and nothing else. "Hope you are well. Hope there's no hell. You will burn. If you should tell. XX." I was freaked out. I had no idea what to do or what it meant, so I called Christine and asked her. She cautioned me to stay calm and told me to go to her store to pick up an herbal remedy that I could mix with water and drink that would help keep me safe. She said it would allow me to project my spirit outside of my body, which meant I could make contact with whatever was doing this to me. She also suggested that I might be able to drive it off, because on the spirit plane I could harness powers my physical body could not. I did as she asked and went to sleep, praying that this remedy would work. When I woke up, I saw my door open, slowly and quietly. A man dressed in all black walked in on his tiptoes, as silently as possible. I tried to move, but I realized that I wasn't in my body. I was outside of myself. Once again, I was at a loss for what to do, and I just watched as it happened. The man pulled a syringe from a case in his pocket and gently pressed it into my skin, injecting me with God knows what. He then began caressing me, touching me, sucking on my neck and chest. I tried to push him off of me, but nothing happened. That's when I realized that I wasn't dealing with a spirit at all. I just thought I was. I was horrified. I had to watch the whole thing happen. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't hide my eyes. This was the worst dream I could ever had, but I knew it was real. I had to watch as this man dressed in all black, who had haunted me for years, forced his way into me and used my body as his own sex toy. I had to watch as the man I had known all of my life, the one I had looked up to most, abused his position of power. I had to watch as my father used stolen drugs to sedate and rape me, as I now knew he had been doing almost my whole life.